All right, we like to make it interesting when we ask for questions on Twitter. We like to get your attention, and I like to use Office gifts because The Office exclusively streams on Peacock. There's Kevin with the stick flip and the smash on the cymbal, and yes, he was indeed, as RMD 1064 points out, famously in a Police cover band, Scrantonicity, and also Scrantonicity 2, not to be confused with Scrantonicity. So let's answer some questions from today's Kevin Malone-inspired mailbag. This one first, though, comes from the Peter King mailbag. You get email questions in response to your Football Morning in America column. FMIA reader Chris De La Tour, why are you poo-pooing the Chiefs' run by playing the what-if game, Peter? Why are you doing that?
Hey, the bottom line is, I wrote in my column the other day, I'm a little bit rethinking, the Kansas City Chiefs as the greatest team of this era. I mean, they, in consecutive Super Bowls, they have scored 10 points in the first 50 minutes of last year's Super Bowl. And this year, in 60 minutes, they scored 9 points. 1 touchdown in those 110 minutes in 16 drives. Now, hey, look. They did come back, obviously, to their credit, and all to their credit, and score 21 points in the last, six and a half minutes in the Super Bowl against San Francisco. Great for them. But, I mean, Mike, you've got to admit, and to my letter writer, I appreciate you writing, but you've got to admit that those were not good offensive performances overall in either game. And so that's why I'm questioning the Chiefs. I think Andy Reid, believe me, is not sort of, Andy Reid doesn't go, I'm poo-pooing that doesn't mean anything. Andy Reid notices that, and he's also saying, hey, by the way, we had to struggle to beat the 4-12 Falcons at home, and we should have had to go to overtime to do it, but their kicker missed a 37-yard kick or whatever it was. But I just think there's some things that it seems to me that people are catching up to that Kansas City does offensively.
Yeah, and when they don't do things like add extra blockers to help with the 5 guys who are struggling to stop the front 4 of the Buccaneers, right, that makes it even worse. Devin White made that point earlier this week on FS1 that they can't say, oh, our top 2 tackles were injured when they did nothing to help the 2 tackles that took their place, and 92% of the time had only 5 blockers to help Patrick Mahomes, who ultimately ran 497 yards for his life behind the line of scrimmage in the game. Mike Dow, 1-888-76340, always want to get the handle accurate. Has Eric Bieniemy's stock fallen after the Chiefs' below-par offensive performance in the Super Bowl, and has he been overtaken by both Byron Leftwich and Todd Bowles, the offensive and defensive coordinators, respectively, of the Buccaneers in terms of future head coaching hires? Peter, your thoughts?
I'll give my thoughts, and I'd really like to hear yours on this as well, Mike. But I think there's 2 things you have to consider here. Number one, Eric Bieniemy over the last 3 years has been a, quote, hot candidate, end quote, and he hasn't gotten a job. It isn't only all the teams that have interviewed him, okay? It is all the teams that have considered him and chose to not interview him, okay? And you have to look at that and you have to say, look, if I'm the NFL right now, Mike, I am basically saying, hey, look, we have done everything in our power to help Eric Bieniemy. And right now, it might be incumbent on us to start to look at a new crop, especially of the younger coaches, like Byron Leftwich, younger minority coaches. And I don't know that they're going to do that. But as I look at it, do you want to keep pounding your head against the wall? I think Eric Bieniemy is being done wrong. We've talked about that ad infinitum. But I do think there comes a point where you have to ask yourself, are we going to head into this and try to force him into a job again in 2021? Or are we going to start to look at new guys?
Byron Leftwich is a fascinating candidate. He got 0 interviews in this latest cycle, but as Bruce Arians talks more and more about what he really does, he runs that offense. He calls the plays. Arians said on Colin Cowherd's show yesterday that one of the reasons he keeps going is he doesn't want to have to call the plays. And if Leftwich had gone, Arians may have considered retiring. And it sets up an intriguing situation for this year, because if Leftwich starts getting interviews and there's a thought he's going to get offers, maybe that's when Arians walks away so the Buccaneers can keep Leftwich and they don't lose both guys. And if I'm Tom Brady and I'm thinking about extending my contract beyond 2021, I want to be damn sure I'm going to have Arians or Leftwich beyond 2021 if I commit to staying past this season, Peter.
Yeah, and let me just say one other thing about this, Mike. For anybody who would say that that Byron Leftwich is basically, riding Bruce Arians' coattails, I had an interesting conversation right after the game, really, a couple days after the game, with Clyde Christensen, the quarterback coach, who has been around forever. Coach Manning, has coached everybody. And he called Byron Leftwich a savant. And we discussed one play in particular in this game. Mike, the first touchdown pass to Rob Gronkowski. Rob Gronkowski has never run that route and caught a pass in his career. If he ever comes into motion, you know what he does very often on that play? He seals the end on that side. So you see Frank Clark right when he is coming into motion. Frank Clark is girding, for Gronk to hit him, and yet Gronk runs right past him, catches the pass, goes in, and Gronk goes to the sidelines and says, "That's unbelievable. I've never done that before. Easiest catch of my life. He's untouched on it. Untouched totally." And at that time, Clyde Christensen said that was the one play that Byron Leftwich could not wait to call in this game, because he said nobody will be expecting this at all. And so he was just like he was yearning all through the pregame and early in that game to call that play. When they got in position, they did it. So, hey, look, Leftwich is a real smart guy. I think things will change for him next year.
And that's a great point. I mean, to the extent that he's able to acquire that knowledge, process it, and have a creative way to twist it and know when to do it, that adds to the notion that he is ready to run a team of his own. A question from an FMIA reader. This is a gentleman named Aaron. Peter, you wrote that Urban Meyer needs someone to be his conscience. Why are you letting him off the hook? How about he finds his own conscience? What say you?
I think it's a very good point. I would agree that Urban Meyer needs to think about things like hiring the Iowa strength coach when he has a history of racially based comments. But I think this, Mike, I think Urban Meyer learned something in that particular situation. He learned that just because Jacksonville's not a big town, or it's not Philly or New York or Chicago or whatever, it's also not Iowa City. And I think he also learned that, I can't get away with hiring these sketchy guys when I come to the NFL. My only point about him needing somebody, wouldn't you think that someone in that organization would have said, Coach, you can't hire Chris Doyle, okay? You can't do that. And even if somebody did, he ran roughshod over him and hired him anyway. But my feeling is nobody said that to him. And I think that's why I think he needs someone to come in and to be able to say, "Hey, Coach, you can't do that here." And I hope that they hire somebody like that.
Yeah, and I think either way it doesn't matter, because fundamentally you need to have the self-awareness. You need to either be able to realize on your own when you're about to step in something that is brown and smelly, or you need to have somebody next to you that will say, "Watch your step." You need to be aware of that. And he's not, or he would have had someone in position to tell him, "Watch your step," or he would have seen it himself. He failed on both counts. So I think the problem is, you have to have it starting within you to either recognize when the mistake is going to be made or have a sufficient breadth of understanding of yourself that there's someone there who feels empowered to say, probably not the best idea. But this is what happens
Mike,
when you give the keys. You give the keys to Urban Meyer and put him completely in charge. What does he do? He acts like he's completely in charge.
But, Mike, you also have to realize that in 17 years as a coach, no one has ever come after him for a hire before. And I have no idea who's been on his staff. We do know that he had the situation, with the sexual abuse charge at Ohio State and all that. Not with him, obviously, but we know that situation was totally messed up, and I get it. But my point is that in 17 years as a coach, he doesn't have. And I'm not, look, I worked in Ohio. I went to college in Ohio. I love Ohio. But you can run roughshod over Central Ohio. You just can. If you're the king at Ohio State. And I just don't think you can do that unless maybe you're Bill Belichick. And again, I don't think Bill Belichick would have ever tried to hire Chris Doyle, because he would have known. It's like when Bill Belichick didn't go get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He just knew. You don't do that. You're smart enough to know that. And I think that's one of the things Urban Meyer is
I think Bill Belichick had to
now.
I think Bill Belichick had to be told in no uncertain terms by someone whose name rhymes with Kraft to not go do that he really did want to do it. But that's where the conscience comes into
Robert
play. That's
Kraft?
the fail-safe. Yeah, that's the fail-safe, though, Peter. It's the dude with the handlebar mustache in Jacksonville who has a power over Urban Meyer that no one has ever had over him before, the owner of an NFL franchise. And, yeah, Urban Meyer didn't avoid stepping in that thing that was brown and smelly, but he had Shad Khan who was able to point out, you got something on your shoe, and you better go get the hose and wash it off. And I apologize profusely for the metaphor there, but it was the only thing I could think of. One more real quick. Gong Show West. Do the New England Patriots have a viable plan for success next season, or have they already begun a different kind of dynasty, a dynasty of obscurity?
Bill Belichick has a plan. The problem with their plan is that they need so much. You not only need a quarterback, which is, oh, by the way, you need a quarterback. That's only the most important guy on any team in any sport. So you need to figure that out. But the other thing you need to do is you need to make up for all the horrendous decisions he's made at tight end and wide receiver, over the last 6, 8, 9 years. He has been a disaster at picking skill players, and in the receiving game. And so that, to me, you've got, this is not a one-year fix-it unless Kurt Warner walks into the building and he does what he did in 2000 or whatever year that was, 99 with the Rams. This is a multi-year fix. And I think people who love the New England Patriots, you just got to be loyal fans for now, because you're not going to have a good team this year. You're just not. And you've got to be willing to put the time in and the effort, because Tom Brady is not riding to the rescue.
J.R. Callow or Kaio, J.R. Chow 13, which is more likely? I couldn't tell whether that was an L or an I. J.R. Chow 13, which is more likely? The Texans are not listening to offers, or the offers aren't as good as expected? What do you think, Peter?
I think the Texans are going to draw a hard line in the sand for a while and say, we're not trading him, stop calling us. Because people are not going to stop calling, okay? They will know a week or so before the draft, are they really going to listen, or are they not going to listen? So to me, I think, the more I think about this, and I've thought about it a lot, I'm writing my column on it for Monday, what's going to happen to Deshaun Watson. Mike, this is going to be a gigantic moment in a lot of careers, what is done with Deshaun Watson.
And, Peter, my concern for the Texans, not that I really care about the Texans. I care about their fans. I care that they aren't suffering through years of dysfunction, and it seems like they may be on track for that. The longer you wait to realize your best move is to trade him, the worse the offers are going to get, because the teams that otherwise would be at the table are going to make other plans. It gets back to what you were suggesting with Chris Ballard and the Colts. At some point, you're moving on. You're going to make a plan at quarterback that doesn't involve Deshaun Watson, because you've got opportunities that you can't continue to wait for an answer from the Texans. And it only takes a couple of teams to still jump in and give the Texans a good return. But I think their best return is to go to Deshaun Watson now, get a list of teams that he would play for, because he has a no-trade clause. He has some control over this. You get 5 or 7 teams, and you finagle an auction. You work the angles. You get them to bid against each other until you find maximum return. And the longer they wait to do that, the harder it's going to be to get the most possible return. So what's going to be proven? They're going to huff and they're going to puff, and eventually Deshaun Watson is going to blow the house down and get out of town anyway, whether it's because he sits out for all or part of a year or whatever. But I don't see the end game. If they just dig in and say, no, you're a Texan, you're a Texan, you're a Texan, where does that ultimately get them that's any better than where they would be if they would just accept reality now and move on? That's the problem I have with it.
You know, I don't have the contract in front of me, but what is Deshaun Watson supposed to make playing for Houston this year? 25?
Not much. $10 million. $10 million.
Oh,
He's got $10 million salary. Next year it's $35 million, but this year it's 10.
Yeah, well, that's a different story then, because if I were him, that makes it eminently more doable to sit out this year, obviously. But Mike, I guess I would ask this question first, okay? If you have a no-trade clause, don't you, as the player, have to say, I'm waiving my no-trade clause for the team to then go out and try to trade him? Because, just think about it. Suppose you say, I'll give you 4 teams, and you can't make a trade with any of those 4 teams. They're offering you a lot less than what you would consider market value. Because honestly, when you think about it, Mike, don't you think about that, you know, if you want to go to 4 teams, wouldn't you maybe give the Houston Texans 4 teams and 3 of them don't want Deshaun Watson and only one of them does, so that one could offer less, so that when Deshaun Watson goes there, they've got more chips to build up their team? It's sort of asking for a friend. I'll ask you.
Well, and I think that makes sense. And let's face it, even if he doesn't have a no-trade clause in his contract, as a practical matter, just like Carson Wentz didn't want to go to Chicago, so Chicago doesn't come to the table. At the end of the day, it's going to be the teams that are interested in Deshaun Watson and the teams that he has interest in. And there should be more than 2 or 3 where those two mindsets intersect, and Watson would go there and the team would want him. And however they come to that conclusion, they identify a universe of candidates, real candidates, viable candidates, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams, and then you work them against each other to get the best possible return. That's all I'm saying. But the other side of this, too, is if you're Deshaun Watson, do you want to go to a team that has given up so much to get you that now that team stinks? So you go from one team that stinks to another team that stinks because they gave up a Herschel Walker type of a package to bring you onto their roster.
You know, look, there are a few teams that need to be on that list, and some of them are obvious. Like, of course, the New York Jets need to be on that list. But if they indeed go to Deshaun Watson and say, what teams would you accept? If they do that, there need to be some teams like, for instance, the San Francisco 49ers. That, to me, is one of the mystique teams in this whole deal. I think Kyle Shanahan would love to have Deshaun Watson. And, you know, Mike, let me just ask you this question. And because we don't know the answer to it, but how much do you think Nick Caserio was either involved or had anything to do in the scouting or giving the nod to drafting Jimmy Garoppolo when he was in New England? I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody right now knows the answer. But That team, to me, is kind of sneaking up on the outside. The only problem is, because my feeling is, and what I'm going to write on Monday, I don't care what anybody says right now, the team that has the best chance, and to me is the most likely that you'd make a trade with, is the New York Jets. Because they've got the second pick in this draft. And if they have the second pick in the draft and they trade Sam Darnold plus the second pick to Houston, plus significantly more. But if you do that, then Houston is saying, look, we love Sam Darnold anyway. We'd like to give him a shot anyway. So maybe then you start to rebuild your franchise that has been stripped barren of draft picks and young prospects because of all the draft mismanagement they had there.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.